We were having problems. The YouTube on the computer just wasn't working. It was just saying going live ... circle going round, and then told me that going live wasn't available right now. So that was very helpful. So sorry about the fact that we're just about 10 minutes late. But I'm finally here for you. Thank you so much for your patience. And I'm sorry that we lost the link for the old video, but we had to start all over again with this one. So hopefully people will see this come up in their feed and join us. So while we're waiting for people to actually notice us in the feed, I thought I'd ask you, where you're joining from this evening or this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are. So if you just want to say hi and where you're from, that would be great, because I'm here in southern Spain. And we've got North Carolina, the US, Las Vegas, Richmond, where else? Texas, Tucson, New York, England, New Jersey, DC, Scotland, Alabama. Wow, lots of places. Florida. Oh, great. Sweden, all around the world. By the way, if you hear weird noise in the background, there's a wedding going on.
It's also me. Hi, everybody.
Also you being noisy in the background. But there's a wedding party decided to descend on the plather on the square just by our house, and they're being quite riotous, having a feast out there and having music as well. So it's not my house playing all the music and having a wild party in the background. It's Spanish people having a good time out there. Okay, where else have we got? Oh, it's lovely. Some really nice comments about how people are excited. Huge Tudor fans. People saying hello to you as well, Tim.
Hi, guys. If it all goes wrong, it's not my fault.
Yes, we were getting very stressed. You missed a right old argument about not being able to get on YouTube live, but we're here now. So, okay, the kind of the theme of this evening is it's your chance to be nosy. Someone's saying a lot of people are on the old link wondering why they're not seeing anything. Well, we couldn't get into the old link to do anything. YouTube, once you haven't gone live and once there's been a problem, you have to start all over again. So I'm just hoping that people will see the new link. Perhaps, Tim, you could go on to Facebook or something and just say if you can log into the Amberlin files, see what you can do about that. But yeah, the theme of this evening is your chance to be nosy and to ask me about myself, my work, my books, yes, anything that you want to ask me personally. We can chat about Tudor history as well, so do feel free to ask me. All the comments have just disappeared, so that's a bit odd.
They come back as you
go. Oh, they're coming back. Okay. How did I come into being a historian? Laura is asking. Oh, and Tammy's asking why Spain. Oh, this is going to be very, very fast. Tim, are you able to keep an eye on questions? Sorry. Okay, how did I come into being a historian? Well, I've always loved history from being a child. I did a topic on Henry VIII and his 6 wives when I was aged 11, and that made me very interested in Henry VIII. How on earth had this man had high school as well? I did at O level and A level, and then I actually did something different at university. I did religion, I did English and education. But in religion, we did a lot on the Reformation and the history of Christianity. So that made me very interested in the Tudors and the big changes that happened during the Tudor period in Europe as well. And so my love of history has always been there. But it was actually a dream I had, and this sounds really weird and wacky now. I was doing freelance writing about all kinds of things that weren't at all to do with history, and getting a bit bored, a bit frustrated with it. And I had a dream about being present at Anne Boleyn's execution, being in the crowd and just being horrified by her execution. And I just waked him up, and I told him that I was starting the Anne Boleyn Files website, that I was researching Anne Boleyn and I wanted to tell the truth about her story and spread the truth. And so that's how that was born. And just a few months later, people were finding me, and that led to me writing the articles for the site, doing more research, and eventually writing my books. And so that's a potted history of how I got into it, and a lot of support and encouragement from people along the way, historians and authors, really supporting me. So that was great. Why Spain? Tammy asked why Spain. Well, we've just had our 13th anniversary of being here. Yesterday it was. Just for a better life, and so that we could both be self-employed and still be able to pay the bills and survive and still have a lovely life with lots of sunshine. Spain's obviously close to the UK, so I can easily get back for things. So Spain kind of ticked all the boxes with being cheap, being in Europe, great quality. What I want to do. Oh, thank you. I'm getting comments about reaching 25,000 subscribers. Thank you. Well, you guys I have to thank. Thank you for following me and for supporting me with my work. It's wonderful to have the feedback. So have you written down any questions for
No, I was just sending a link to the other dead feed.
Okay, so I'm missing questions because I'm doing it on the phone. I can't scroll through. Well, I can scroll through. Let's have a look. Plans is to write a book about Elizabeth I. No. It's the short answer to that one. I've got lots of book plans. I'm writing about Catherine Howard, the fall of Catherine Howard, a countdown. That's been on the cards since 2012, and I keep putting it on the back burner. So I'm writing about Catherine Howard. The Anne Boleyn Collection 3 is going to be coming out soon. That's all done. Just got to go through the layout and editing various bits and pieces, but that's coming very soon. That's a collection of articles from the Anne Boleyn files. Then I'm moving on. In the background, I'm doing work with Owen Emerson, who is Castle Supervisor at Hever Castle. We're writing a book on the social history of Hever Castle, the families that owned Hever Castle, bringing it sort of to the people that had links with Hever Castle, not just the architecture and history of the castle itself, but looking at it through the eyes of the people that lived there and what it would have been like at different periods. So what it would have been like when the Boleyns lived there, what it was like when the Waldegraves and the Astles and all the families that had links to it. Various other books in the pipeline, but none about Elizabeth, I'm afraid. I know, just because I don't feel that I could do any better than the books that are already out there. I mean, one of my favourites is David Starkey's book on her her early life and her early reign, and I love the ones by Alison Plowden and Anne Somerset. I loved those ones, and I just don't think I could write anything that would be better or add to the sort of dialogue about Elizabeth. So sorry, I do love Elizabeth though. Sorry, you're going to get my finger coming over because it's the only way that I can. I could use that hand. Yes, I could. Oh, people are being so lovely. Have I? I have. I haven't written a book about him. Written lots of articles about him for the Tudor Society and for the Anne Boleyn Files, and also he's covered quite a lot in my book, The Fall of Anne Boleyn: A Countdown, because obviously he played a key role in Anne's downfall. There are different theories about his role, whether he instigated it and sort of manipulated the king, or whether he was just being the king's good servant. I think it was both. I think he was being the king's good servant in that Henry VIII instigated it, but I then think that Thomas Cromwell used it to get rid of some of the men that he was seeing as having too much influence on the king. A bit like when Cardinal Wolsey did his Eltham ordinances to get rid of the young chaps who he felt were having a bad influence on the young King Henry VIII, and he purged them out of the Privy Chamber. I think this was Cromwell's way of getting rid of people like Sir Henry Norris, groom of the stool, who was having too much influence, men that were standing in his way like William Brereton, who was opposing his plans in Cheshire and North Wales. So a bit of both. So I've covered Cromwell a lot in my book there, and also in articles that I've done. People saying, thank you, Shay wants to order my book. Thank you, that would be wonderful. It's so lovely when I hear people saying that they want to read my book. It's thrilling, it's very, very exciting. Okay, have I appeared in any documentaries, says Jason? Have I appeared in any documentaries? I don't think I have. I've been asked to appear in documentaries.
You were in the New York Post?
No, I was in the USA Today.
USA
no,
Today.
I've been in newspapers. I haven't been in documentaries. I was asked to be in one about Mary Boleyn and Anne Boleyn, but the themes that they wanted me to discuss, it was all about feminism and that, and it didn't really sit with kind of how I sort of picture Anne Boleyn. And also there's so little we know about Mary Boleyn. The whole project, I didn't feel comfortable with it. And it also would have meant flying over to the UK just for a few hours. That's all they wanted me for. So it didn't sit comfortably with me. I've been interviewed for sort of projects and that, but I haven't appeared in any actual documentaries. Okay. What is my opinion, Lisa says, as to whether Elizabeth I and Dudley actually had a sexual relationship? I think they had an intimate relationship. I think they were truly in love. I think they were separated. They couldn't be together because of what happened with Dudley's wife, Amy, and the scandal surrounding that. And there were various other factors that kept them apart. I think they were certainly in love and were intimate, but didn't go all the way. I don't think Elizabeth could have risked pregnancy. I just don't think. And also that there's various points where Elizabeth was examined very intimately to check that she was still could still have children when she was having marriage negotiations, for example, with France. She had a very intimate examination by doctors, and it would have been noticed if she'd been engaging in sex with. So no, I don't think they went all the way, but I do think that they were intimate. Okay, let's have a look. Thank you. Deanna saying, I can't wait to read about the fall of Catherine Howard. Thank you very much. Marilyn's asking, do I think there was anything in Elizabeth or Baron Seymour of Sudeley? Now, this is really hard to say because we are going on the confessions of Catherine Ashley and Thomas Parry. And they were obviously from Elizabeth's household. They were concerned. There was a lot of concern in the household as to what was happening. It all seemed to be coming from Thomas Seymour. Elizabeth was about 14 at the time, and Thomas Seymour was married to Catherine Parr. Elizabeth had gone to live with Catherine Parr. Thomas Seymour was letting himself into Elizabeth's chamber before the princess had risen. So she was in her night clothes, and he is described as one time just being in his shirt and slippers. And Tudor men, their underwear was a shirt without anything else on. So he was half naked, coming into her room, stroking her buttocks, tickling her. Catherine even joined them on one occasion, I think, to try and stop what was going on, to try and be there. But there's another occasion where it was said that she held Elizabeth in the garden, held her, restrained her, while Seymour slashed at the princess's gown, slashing it into pieces. So there was certainly inappropriate behaviour going on. We can't say it's child abuse, because in those days, Elizabeth would have been marriageable. She would have been seen as a woman. So they had very different ideas about children. People like Catherine Willoughby were married at that time. You've got Lady Margaret Beaufort had a child by that time. So it wasn't child abuse, but it was certainly inappropriate, and I would call it sexual abuse because it is clear that Elizabeth didn't want it. She started getting up earlier, trying to lock her chambers. She made sure she was fully dressed before he could get into her room. So she did things to try and stop it. There was concern in the household, and Catherine eventually sent Elizabeth away to protect her reputation. I don't think Elizabeth did anything to instigate it. It was said that she blushed when Seymour sort of looked her way and Catherine found them in an embrace, but that certainly doesn't mean that Elizabeth was a willing participant. So very unsavoury things happening there. Let's have a look at some more questions. Cynthia's asking, do I think that Anne should be moved and buried with Elizabeth? No, I actually feel very strongly that she shouldn't be moved. There isn't any room in Westminster Abbey anyway for other burials and for people to be moved around. This became an issue when there was the whole Richard III burial sort of questions, people arguing over that. I think her place in the Tower speaks of her story. It's where she spent her final days, her final hours. She was killed at the Tower. She was buried with love. Her ladies took her to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, and they cared for her and they buried her with respect. And now she was exhumed in the 1870s when there was work done on the chancel. A skeleton remains were found in the spot where Anne was recorded as being buried, and they were collected together, examined, and then put back in a leaden coffer. A plaque, a little nameplate, and her details, date of birth, death date, and exhumation date, reinterment date were all put on it. And then she was buried in that spot. And there's a memorial tile that was done at the same time, marking that spot as the burial place of Queen Anne Boleyn with her arms. It's beautiful. The chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula is a working place of worship. It is used by the yeoman warders. It's used for Sunday services, for special services like christenings and weddings. So it's a place of worship, and it is stunning. It is beautiful. And for me, I love visiting that chapel because it's so quiet and it's so peaceful. Whereas Westminster Abbey, I find, is so packed, so jam-packed, so busy. You don't get a chance to look at anything. It's like a conveyor belt. You're kind of pushed through. So for me to be able to pause for a while at Anne's resting place is so much nicer than visiting Westminster. And the Tower is a huge part of Anne's story, so I think it's very fitting that she is there. Okay, Lilchi721. Were Mary and Elizabeth ever close? Yes, they were. They were close. They were close when Elizabeth was growing up. There doesn't seem to be any sign that Mary took out any of her rage at the situation on Elizabeth at all. There seems to be a close sort of bond. Mary, and when Mary came to the throne in 1553, she invited Elizabeth to ride through the streets of London with her, whether that was just good PR. But Elizabeth was there in the early stages. There was division later. Elizabeth didn't play ball the same way that Mary didn't play ball in Edward VI's reign with his religious legislation. There was no way she was giving up the mass for her half brother. Elizabeth didn't want to obey Mary either, and obviously Elizabeth then got linked to Wyatt's rebellion as well and ended up being in the Tower. So obviously that was a huge division, and ended up, when she was released from the Tower, going into house arrest at Woodstock before she was allowed back to her own estates. So there was huge division there, but I think they were close earlier, yes. Let's look at some more questions. Random guy Jeff, which executioner family dispatched of the Tudor queens? An inherited position, I understand. We don't know the names at all. We know that, for example, Anne Boleyn had an executioner who was actually called for. He was famous for his skill. He was called the Hangman of Calais, or the Swordsman of Calais, or Saint Omer. He was how Anne was executed, but he is not named, and I haven't been able to find a name. There is this tradition that he was called Jean Rambaud, but that is not backed up by any actual evidence. I haven't been able to find anything in the records about a name. There's no names given for the other executioners either, and I don't know about it being a family sort of inherited position in England. I really don't know, but I think they had to kind of remain sort of anonymous, perhaps so there wasn't any comeback on them or their family, but they're certainly not named in the records, the executioners that did these deeds. I mean, Thomas Cromwell's one is, I think he's Edward Hall talks about him being a butcherly miser, you know, because he did his job so badly. Poor Thomas Cromwell ended up suffering badly on the block. Let's have a look at some more questions. Did Will Summers know Anne? Asks Rich Jackson. Yes, he did. In fact, it was I did an article on the Anne Boleyn files quite recently, because there was a recent On This Day in Tudor history where Will Summers nearly got himself into big trouble because he actually called Anne Ribald, and Elizabeth a bastard at court in front of Henry VIII, and spoke in defence of Catherine of Aragon. So of course this didn't go down very well, and it was, you know, Henry VIII was going to kill him. He was so cross. Summers ended up getting banished from court for a bit and actually being protected by Sir Nicholas Carew. The same Nicholas Carew that we see in 1536 coaching Jane Seymour in how to behave to win the king over and to tell him things about Anne Boleyn. So Nicholas Carew sheltered the king's fool, Will Summers, after he upset the king by and Princess Elizabeth. So yes, he certainly knew Anne. Yes, he was at court being the fool at the time. Thank you. The Greater Bilby, I think that says, is saying that saying I absolutely love your tattoo, by the way, so meaningful and beautifully done too. Yes, thank you. There you go. I've still got it. It's not a transfer. It is real. Yeah, if you don't know, it's the temps viendra, je Anne Boleyn. The time will come, signed Anne Boleyn. We don't know quite what it means, whether the time will come. It was written on a page with the picture of the Last Judgment, whether God's judgment would come one time or whether she was hoping for something else, whether it's a message of hope. We don't know, but I had it done shortly before I went to actually view and hold Anne's books of hours. Special thing for me. I've got a piece of Tudor history on my skin and a reminder of that wonderful day that I spent with Owen Emerson and Alison Palmer at the castle, holding those books, looking through them. Oh, fab. I was in my element. Oh, Linda. Do you agree with the opinion that the wives that were foreign born were spared the axe due to that? Linda's asking me. No, I don't agree that they were. No. How can I put this? Obviously, Anne. I don't know why Anne was spared the axe, Anne Boleyn. I don't know whether it was because Henry VIII knew that she was innocent and so therefore was trying to give her a more merciful death, whether it was harking back to her time in France and her French mannerisms, I don't know. But I mean, the only other wife that was executed was Catherine Howard, who obviously was an English girl related to the prestigious Howards. She was executed by axe. Catherine of Aragon never got the threat of execution. She was banished. The marriage was annulled, and even though she opposed it, there was never any, I think, real concern that she was going to be executed because of her links with the Holy Roman Emperor. Henry VIII could not have moved against Catherine of Aragon without causing war. Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, a very powerful man, the most powerful man in Europe. It would have upset the Pope as well. There was a reason why Henry VIII celebrated Catherine of Aragon's death in January 1536 and said, we are free from war, the suspicion of war. He didn't have all of that trouble sort of hanging over him. Jane Seymour obviously never did anything to upset the king. She gave him a son and then popped her clogs before he could get tired of her. Anne of Cleves played ball and accepted the situation. She didn't want to. She was heartbroken. She thought that the king was going to go back to her after Catherine Howard fell. So I don't. She was fine. Obviously Catherine Howard, and then Catherine Parr ended up, being in a spot of bother as there were members of the King's Council that didn't like her reformed faith and how she was perhaps having a bit too much influence on the king. Luckily, she was pre-warned and managed to get to the king. And it does seem that if you managed to get to the king, if you heard there was trouble brewing and you managed to get to the king and talk to him, that would help the situation. Anne Boleyn never had that chance. Catherine Howard never had that chance. Catherine Parr did, and she managed to talk him round. And of course, the men that then came to arrest her got into huge trouble. So I don't believe that the foreign wives were spared the axe because they were foreign. Obviously, Catherine of Aragon having those powerful links saved her. Anne of Cleves, perhaps the king wouldn't have wanted to upset the Lutheran princes and Cleves, but I think it was more the fact that Anne behaved and accepted things and became the king's beloved dear sister. So I think it's more to do with that. Beth, am I the only one that's getting buffering? I don't know. I'm sorry. I hope you are being able to watch. I don't know whether there are glitches going on with YouTube this evening. Chrome's Bones is asking if I speak Spanish now. Sí. Yes, I do speak Spanish, not brilliantly. I speak enough Spanish to get by. I'm having Spanish lessons, and I also practice. I've got a very patient friend, Anna, who doesn't speak a word of English, and we go out for a drink once a week for an hour, just for a coffee, and we have a good gossip. I can actually gossip in Spanish, and she helps me with my grammar and everything. So Tim and I know enough to get by. Our 3 children are completely fluent, which is great for them. We moved when they were really little, so they've gone to school here. They're going off to university in Spain as well. So yeah, I think people are saying that things are working now, so I hope it is. My son's birthday was great, thank you, Michael. Thank you, all of you saying that you're big fans. That's lovely, lovely, lovely to say. Random Guy Jeff again, what do you think your attachment is to these people, as if you know them? I don't think it's anything spiritual, or I don't think that I was like I'm reincarnated, or there's anything like that. For me, it's just Henry VIII, for example, is such a big character, and as I said, this story gripped me when I was 11, that this man had executed 2 women, and but he'd had 6 wives. It's just, you couldn't even write this story. I mean, if you wrote the Tudors story for a soap opera, people would say, well, that's a bit unbelievable, isn't it? It's just such a huge soap opera kind of thing, and I just, for me, they're just fascinating people. A fascinating time of history as well. I've always loved the Reformation. and the changes in religion, the faith. These poor people, the English people living where 1 minute you were supposed to be Catholic, the next minute you were meant to be Protestant, and changing times, all really fascinating, juicy stuff, and such strong women at a time when women weren't meant to be strong either. I mean, the Anne Askews of the world, the Anne Boleyns of the world, the Catherine Brandons of the world, just amazingly strong women. So such huge characters who are still kind of speaking to us today through their stories, through history. Just brilliant. I'm not quite sure what my attachment is to them, but it's a very, very strong attachment in that I do it every day. Without fail, I'm doing something to do with Tudor history every day. So I do hope that people aren't getting buffering. I don't know whether it's a YouTube thing or whether it's the good old internet. I'm not sure. Greetings to all of you. People are saying where they're from and that. It's wonderful over the world. Chelsea asking me about what I think of Wolf Hall, the book. I really struggled with Hilary Mantel's books, Wolf Hall and Bringing Up the Bodies. I read them because I felt I had to, because of course they're about, those two books are very much about Anne Boleyn's fall. But I really didn't get on with the style. I can't remember how they're written. Are they in? They're in third person but present tense, I think. But I just found it really hard, the style. And I also, when I'm reading a novel, I like to at least like one character. And I was reading these and I thought, I don't even like Cromwell. We were seeing things from Cromwell's point of view, so I could understand how Anne Boleyn might be not very nice, and the men might not be very nice, and George Boleyn's not very nice. But I couldn't even get on with Cromwell. I couldn't stand him either, and I really didn't care what happened to anyone. And so I didn't enjoy them. But then I've got friends that absolutely loved them, so I can understand why they've been so popular and why they've been prize winning, but for me they just weren't my cup of tea. So let's have a look at some more questions. Sorry if I'm ignoring some questions. It's really, really hard to do it on my phone, but as I said, we couldn't do it on the computer because it just didn't seem to work. So what do I make of Anne's portrayal in Wolf Hall? Hand of Blue has asked. Well, I thought Claire Foy, brilliant actress. I don't know why they had her every now and then. Whenever she addressed Cromwell, she suddenly went into a French accent and said Cromwell, and sort of was, spiteful and horrible with him. I was like, if you're going to give Anne a French accent, then give it to her all the time, not just when she's saying Cromwell's name. She's not a very likable character at all. I mean, who knows what Anne Boleyn was really like in real life. She had a lot of supporters, a lot of loyal friends, loyal members of her household, chaplains who adored her. But she may have been quite a difficult person, but I'm sure she wasn't quite as obnoxious as Wolf Hall's Anne Boleyn. So yes, I didn't like her, no. People are asking for merchandise links. You may have noticed that every now and then I wear a t-shirt with Anne Boleyn or Elizabeth on. They're all available from the Anne Boleyn Files website. There's when it's working, it's been down because server, what's been happening to upgrading of the server, upgrading a disk or something. Not really techy.
I can come and answer that question if you want.
Well, very, very quickly, because we want to talk history, not tech.
The website will be back online pretty soon. We had one of our hard disks go down, but it had been going since 2012, so it was time to upgrade. So everything hopefully will be a lot faster with the new drives, and fingers crossed in the next couple of days it'll all be back up again. So wish us luck with that one.
But when it's up and running, on the top menu bar, there is a bit that says products, and if you go into that, there's Elizabeth I apparel, there's Anne Boleyn apparel, there's jewellery, there's all sorts of Tudor goodies there, and also down the side menu I sort of pick out a few different ones, t-shirts, jewellery, and that. So Yes, made by the wonderful Tiffany in Colorado, US, all handmade, absolutely beautiful. So yes, and I wear them myself. It was funny on the tour, the Executed Queen's tour. Each day I was wearing a different necklace, a different pendant for the Executed Queen that we were talking about that day, paying tribute to them. Christine saying, why do a lot of historians not like Alison Weir? I don't want to get at all personal. The reason I struggle with Alison Weir's books solely because as a researcher, I find them hard to use just because the references, she doesn't tend to put full references. She will just put like letters and papers, foreign, domestic, Henry VIII. Well, letters and papers, how many volumes has it got? 21 volumes and hundreds of documents in each volume. And I need to know, as someone that's a researcher, I want to know exactly which letter the historian is basing their view on. Where are you quoting from? What are you talking about? So historians struggle with using books like that and sort of, arguing points of view when they can't tell what a person has based their view on. So for me personally, it's just finding the notes and references sections of her books very, very hard to use. Other ones like Eric Ives, for example, Gareth Russell, lots of other historians, their notes and references. Oh, I say this about Julia Fox's book on Jane Boleyn. Her notes in that are as readable as the main text of the book. There's so much in the notes section and so meticulous. I just adore it. I get, as a researcher, as someone that wants to go and find out where that was said, who said it and in what context. It's a pleasure. Books like that, really, really helpful. I can't comment on why other historians perhaps don't like, Alison Weir at all, but that's sort of my reason why I don't use her books as much as I use other historians' books. Let's have a look. Sorry, I'm scrolling past some questions. Crone's Bones asks, when Anne's remains were dug up in the 1870s and her bones examined to be determined or confirmed if they were indeed hers, were there not remnants of her garments or jewellery? No. They'd all been piled up. It looks as if they'd been disturbed previously, and they were all kind of in a pile in the same place, and they were just bones. I think there were remnants of the chest as well, the elm chest that had been used, but no fabric, no jewellery was mentioned. But then that would have been stripped from her at her execution. I mean, she was undressing, she was taking all her bits and pieces off, all her jewellery. At your execution, your clothing was sort of used as part payment for the executioner. And in Anne's case as well, things would have been taken, her jewellery would have been taken by the crown and then broken up and sort of recycled. Costumes were recycled. Your outfit wasn't just a dress, you had various bits to your dress, so things like that were recycled. So there's no mention when they exhumed Anne of anything apart from the bones. A lot of people say, oh, well, wasn't it clear, that it was Anne because of her neck bones? Couldn't you tell from the neck bones that a sword was used? But it seems that the bones weren't completely altogether complete. I think there were various vertebrae sort of missing, so it was all piled up in this little pile, and they were examined. And of course, this was by a 19th century pathologist, so not using any of the advances that we have today. Gave her, an estimate of her height and her build, and things like that, but no jewelry or clothing, I'm afraid. G. Miller saying yes. So Westminster is too touristy. For me, yes, that's why I wouldn't like to see Anne in there. And I don't see the need to exhume her again unless the chancel of the chapel needed any restoration work done. I'm not keen on exhuming her so that we can, do a mock-up, a reconstruction of her face, for example, of her head, because no, you'd be ruining a Victorian floor. I just don't see the need to desecrate a place of worship for our curiosity. I'd love to know what she looked like, but it just doesn't seem right unless restoration work is needed. Just having a look through other questions. Carrie asking, did Anne and Jane Seymour ever get into a fight? And why couldn't just dismiss her? Okay, so one story, I think was it in Jane Dormer's, a book about Jane Dormer, who was lady in waiting for Mary I. There is a story that Anne found Jane Seymour on Henry VIII's lap, and she also noticed that Jane was wearing a locket which had Henry's image in it, and that she tears it off with her. There doesn't seem to be any sort of mention of that in the actual contemporary sources. That was sort of slightly later, that story. There doesn't seem to be any mention of that, although there is mention that Anne's miscarriage in January 1536 was because that Jane was a factor in it, that she'd noticed, Henry VIII and Jane. But no, there's no mention in the contemporary sources of any sort of fight between them. Jane was one of Anne's ladies. There's no evidence that Anne moved against Jane and had her dismissed or anything. Perhaps it was better to keep an eye on her. Perhaps Anne was just hoping that it would just fizzle out. I do feel very sorry for Anne. It was a love match, her and Henry, and so to try not to be jealous when her husband, the king, was sort of flirting with one of her ladies, to try and keep quiet when that's what happened with her. She was one of Catherine's ladies when the king noticed her. She knew how dangerous it could be if the king sort of noticed you. Her relationship was at risk if Henry VIII fell in love with one of her ladies. A really impossible situation. Let me have a look. More questions. Chelsea Peters Parkinson asking how many artifacts that belong to Anne are there? Just the books of Hours. There are 3 books of Hours. All 3 of them actually used to be in Hever Castle's collection, but one of them ended up in the British Library. So there are 3 books of Hours. Trying to think what else is there. There's lots of things that are linked to Anne tenuously. There's a pistol pendant that was said to be owned by her, but I've never actually found any evidence that it was. There's the Wyatt Psalter, which is a little book, a Psalter being a book that has psalms in it. Said traditionally to have been carried by Anne to her execution and given to the Wyatt family, ending up perhaps through Marjorie Lee, Thomas Wyatt's sister, who Anne was very close to. There's quite a few sort of tenuous kind of links. There are manuscripts that belong to Anne that George Boleyn had translated and commissioned for her. There are religious works about the Reformed faith, evangelical works. So there are those. There's the Boleyn Cup, which is in a church in Cirencester. So there are letters that are written by her. I'm trying to think what else there is. There's no jewellery. The bee necklace, for example, doesn't exist. There are things listed in Henry VIII's inventory that was still around at his death in 1547 that could have had links to Anne, things with her initials, books, manuscripts. I'm trying to think whether there's much else. There's things with her falcon badge. Oh, there's the choir screen in the church in Cambridge, King's College Church, which has got sort of Anne and Henry's motifs on it. It didn't belong to Anne, but was done in tribute to her and Henry VIII. So there are things like that around. Yeah, the letter from the Tower, whether or not she wrote that, Sandra Fasoli's done some excellent work on that, believing that that letter that was written on the 6th of May from the lady in the Tower, that she really did write that to Henry VIII. There's the H&A sort of motifs that you'll find that Henry VIII didn't manage to completely destroy. There's still a couple in Hampton Court Palace. So there are various things that are linked to Anne, or that are in architecture to do with Anne, but not no pieces of jewelry. It'd be wonderful if we found a journal, for example, and the bee necklace. Let's have a look. What else? Nicole saying, do you think Henry VIII felt any remorse when he had his wife Anne and Catherine beheaded? He spoke of his remorse for Thomas Cromwell. He spoke of his regrets, and well, in fact, he blamed it on his Privy Council, saying that they'd sort of tricked him into sort of doing it. They'd made him think he was a bad man. We never hear him really saying anything about Catherine Howard or Anne Boleyn. Sandra Vasoli, her book on the Tower letter, from the lady in the Tower, I would recommend that highly. Really, really good read. She also mentions, I think it's a comment, it's a source by Andre Thebe, I'm not sure whether I've got that right, about Henry VIII possibly speaking on his deathbed in his last hours of his regret over Anne. So we do have one source, but it's not backed up by other sources. Other sources talk about the king not being able to speak in his last hours. By the time that Archbishop Cranmer got there, for example, Henry couldn't speak anymore and was just having to squeeze the Archbishop's hand. So we don't know, but he didn't do anything obvious to show that he regretted it. Henry would have just moved on. He did. If you'd moved against him, he felt you betrayed him in some way, then you were dead and gone, and he moved on. So no, I think he would have seen it as a sign of weakness to have regretted it. I'm just scrolling through. I want to see some later questions, otherwise you'll think I'm ignoring you. Yes, people asking about where is Henry VIII buried? Ebby Angel asking that, but people are answering St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. That's right, there is a slab on the floor in the beautiful chapel where, of course, Meghan Markle marries Prince Harry. There's a slab on the floor. You can miss it actually, because you're not expecting it to be just a slab, but it's where Henry VIII is buried. It's where Jane Seymour is buried as well, and also King Charles I was put in that vault as well, and a baby as well from the Stuart Queen, Queen Anne, is in the same vault. Jane Seymour's heart, it seems we have evidence that Jane Seymour's heart is in the Chapel Royal at Hampton Court Palace, because she died at Hampton Court Palace. It was quite normal for your entrails, organs to be buried somewhere else. It was quite practical, actually, if you had to lie in state for a while for your innards, to be buried somewhere else, because they were the first bits that went off, decomposed. Or you might want to honour two places, have your heart, entrails buried in one place, and then your body buried in another, just to honour two places. So there is evidence, there is a contemporary accounts that Jane's heart was buried at Hampton Court Palace, but her body lies with Henry VIII in St George's Chapel. Louise Wren asking, what do I think was the cause of Mary I's phantom pregnancies? I really don't know. I haven't been able, in my research, I've never really concluded whether I think that she had some issue, like whether there was some type of tumour that she had, which obviously killed her in 1558. There was certainly something, going on, whether she had an ovarian tumour or something. I certainly think the first sort of pregnancy, false pregnancy, was probably a proper phantom pregnancy, where she really, really wanted a baby, and her body fooled her into her thinking she was pregnant. And we know today that the body can do amazing things. You can grow, your abdomen can grow, your breasts can change, you can completely look as if you are pregnant and feel that you are pregnant and you're not. So I think it's quite likely that the first pregnancy was something like that, that she so needed a baby, so wanted a baby, so wanted to be happy with Philip, so wanted to continue the Tudor line. But that second one, I'm not so sure whether that might have been something going on. We know she'd had health problems throughout her life, especially with her time of the month of menstruation. She really suffered. So whether there'd been something wrong always, it's hard to know. I haven't got the medical expertise to kind of rule on that, I'm afraid. Let's have a look at some more questions. Mystic Eyes 411, do you do any podcast or recommend any good ones on Tudor history? My On This Day in Tudor History videos that you see here on YouTube, I also, Tim helpfully takes the audio from them, and I'm on Podbean, aren't I? If you look up Tudor history, in fact, if you Google Tudor history, Claire Ridgway, Podbean, you'll find me on Podbean. I'm also on Apple. Podbean goes out to Apple, Spotify. So yeah, if you look up Tudor history, Claire Ridgway, if you Google that podcast, you'll find me on whichever platform that you use, whether you're an iTunes person or whether you prefer Spotify or Podbean. So you can get the audio only if you prefer to listen rather than watch. Another one I really enjoy, and I was very honoured to be interviewed for it, was Talking Tudors with my dear friend Natalie Gruninger. Natalie's brilliant. She's such a lovely person, and she does her Talking Tudors podcasts, and they're really good. She does lots of Q&A interview sessions with historians and authors. They're fabulous. So I'd recommend Natalie's podcasts too. We're coming up to the hour, but I will keep going for a few minutes because Tim's pointing at his watch. But I was late starting because of glitch, YouTube not letting me. So I will go on for an extra few minutes. Eileen asking, with which of the 6 wives do you think you'd be friends? Oh, that's a tough one, isn't it? I admire all of them in different ways. Let's see. Catherine of Aragon would be that friend that you can really trust and confide in, and that would give you good advice. Although she might be a little bit, she was very pious at times and sort of wore, she might be wearing a hair shirt all the time. She might get on my nerves a bit for being a bit too pious. But I think she'd be a good one. She'd have your back. Anne Boleyn would be that really witty one. I always see Anne as witty, but wouldn't suffer fools gladly, so might get a bit fed up of me at times. But would be great to have around for a dinner party. And I do think, I really obviously admire Anne Boleyn. She's my historical heroine, and I would love a dinner party with her and George. I think that would be wonderful. And Thomas Wyatt could come along as well. And they could just stun me with their wit, their intelligence, their poetry. I'd love that. So she'd be the friend, and she might be a bit bitchy at times, and would probably tell you when you're looking awful in an outfit, and probably wouldn't like my fashion sense. So she's that kind of friend. Jane Seymour, I just can't like her. That makes me sound awful. It's not just, I don't see her as the meek and mild one. I see her as, well, perhaps she was a pawn being used by her family and didn't have much control over what happened in 1536, but she was actually, we know from contemporary reports that she was telling the king that his marriage to Anne Boleyn wasn't popular and that wasn't right, and backing up all of his paranoia. She might not have had any choice in that, but I just can't like the woman, and I think that she'd just get on my nerves too much, so I wouldn't have her as a friend. Anne of Cleves, I think I would be really good friends with. She seems to have been such a lovely person. At her death in, was it 1557, her household was so upset, and everyone seems to have loved her. She seems to have been such a lovely lady, so I'd like to have her in my life as a friend. Catherine Howard would be great for going out on the town with and having a bit of fun with, but I think she'd lead me astray. So perhaps I shouldn't have Catherine Howard as a friend. And Catherine Parr, I think, would be far too intelligent for me. But she'd be another sort of witty, intelligent woman to have around. Oh, so out of those, who'd be the best one? I think Anne of Cleves actually would be the one that you'd want as your best mate. I think she was just a lovely, lovely lady. But, I can't not say Anne Boleyn, really. Anne Boleyn would be fabulous to have in my life. Okay. Bill Bob says, why did Henry fall out of favour with Anne, or Anne fall out of favour with Henry? Was it all based on her not issuing a son? So many factors, and you could write a book on it, which I have actually done. I think, various factors all sort of creating a perfect storm. I think his love for Anne had been very obsessive, very passionate, and I think all of the pressure and everything that had happened for him to have Anne had sort of taken its toll on the relationship. Then, she'd only given him a daughter. And I'm saying that, in the way that he felt about it, not how I feel about it. I mean, Elizabeth obviously made a wonderful monarch in the end, but, only a daughter in Henry's eyes. And then obviously suffered at least one other miscarriage, the miscarriage of 1536. And we don't know what happened to her pregnancy in 1534, whether it was a stillbirth or whether it was a phantom pregnancy. It just disappears from the records. And I think he saw history repeating itself. Catherine of Aragon had had at least 6 pregnancies and had only been able to give him a son who lived for 52 days and a daughter. The rest, was stillborn or died shortly after birth. I think he saw history repeating itself. Anne was becoming a bit of a problem, bit of an obstacle with sort of foreign policy, and was just being a bit of a pain in that way. And then there was Jane Seymour. She came from good stock, in that she came from a large family, and a large family of mainly sons. And I think Henry VIII just wanted to move on and have a fertile wife and have the chance of having a son. And Catherine of Aragon's death meant that he could put Anne to one side, move on from Anne, and not be persuaded to return to Catherine because she was gone. So he didn't have to do that. He could move on properly with Jane. But there were various other factors. I could spend a whole evening with you talking about that. But yes, a lot of it came down to her not giving him a son. I think she would have been safe if she had given him a son, put it that way. She would have been untouchable because she would have given him a Prince of Wales. Just perhaps one more. Janie's asking, do I think Catherine of Aragon was poisoned? No, I don't. She'd been ill for several months, although Chapuis writes of her being taken sort of more ill after drinking some Welsh ale. I don't think that she was poisoned at all. There's nothing to suggest she was poisoned. Obviously, they didn't have the medical expertise that we have today. When the chandler, and it came down to a chandler doing, preparing a body for death, a chandler and a plumber really handled all the burial, because yeah, you didn't have pathologists, you didn't have morticians, you didn't have anything like that. The Chandler examined her body and said that her heart was sort of black and it had a funny sort of growth on it. And of course, anything unusual was like, oh, poison, she must be poisoned. But no one was accused of it. It wasn't talked about seriously. And today, the medical sort of opinion from the descriptions are that she had that was a secondary tumour on her heart, and she'd obviously had cancer for some time for it to be the secondary tumour. So no, there was no sort of serious accusation of poisoning. Just a very, very sad death. Can I fit in one more question? Question Wednesday's child about Anne's hair colour and eye colour. Now, this is really, really difficult. We don't really have a proper, detailed sort of description of Anne. All we know is that her hair was dark. And in the MPG, National Portrait Gallery, sort of famous portrait, that one that we all recognise as Anne, her hair's quite chestnut in that one. In the Hever Castle Rose one, it's much, much darker. And of course, you've got the John Hoskins beautiful miniature of her having very reddish hair. Thomas Wyatt, in his poem Brunette, which is about Anne, obviously she was brunette, but how brunette she was, how dark her hair was, it's hard to say. I often talk about it when I'm talking about Anne's looks. I often mention the fact that my hair in reality is very dark brown. My mother's a redhead, and obviously that's somehow come through with my hair, because in the summer my hair, when it was dark brown, used to have red highlights in it. So I used to love it. I used to love bringing out those highlights a bit more. But yes, it used to go red. So I'm just wondering if Anne was one of those brunettes, one of those dark-haired ladies where she had red highlights to it, and perhaps that's what John Hoskins was bringing out. Obviously, pigments change over time in painting, so it is hard to know. But she certainly had, her eyes were described as sort of being black. So they were obviously that dark that they looked black, very, very dark brown eyes. I'm sure probably my eyes look black on the video. I've got very dark brown eyes. So from a distance, dark brown eyes can look black. Tim, have I got time for one more, do you think?
I was thinking one more, yeah.
Generic Robin is asking, what qualities about Anne Boleyn make her my hero? That is so hard to say. Her courage, the way that she handled those last days. I mean, there is a reason why Sir William Kingston talked about this lady has much joy in death. She was amazingly courageous. Okay, she went into hysterics at times, but she spent a lot of time sort of cajoling her ladies and sort of making jokes about how she'd be known as Queen Anne Lackerhead, and things like that. And her amazing courage throughout her life, really. Her wit, her intelligence, her interest. I mean, I feel a real link with her because of her faith. I have a very strong faith. And Anne was reading sort of religious literature, cutting edge religious literature. Her brother was even further along with that path, actually. You can't call Anne a Protestant. She was a Catholic. Everything she was reading was Catholic. She never embraced Protestantism. So her interest in religion, her interest in the arts, the patronage of, she's definitely linked to Hans Holbein. I mean, she's just this incredible woman, as I said earlier, at a time when women weren't meant to be like this. You know, she had so much influence, and she used her influence to bring evangelical men to court and to help them rise to prominence. She was charitable. She really believed in good works, that out of faith came good works, that if you believed in God and you were a true Christian, then you did good works. And she made sure her ladies made shirts, and that sheets and shirts and things were given out on progresses. And there's so much I admire about. So what else do I admire about her, Tim? What am I always saying about Anne?
You also don't think, though, that she's perfect.
Oh, I don't think she's perfect. No, I don't see her as Saint Anne that should be put on a pedestal. For me, one of the things that I really love about her is that she's so flawed. You know, she wasn't a nice person all the time. I don't like her role in the treatment of Mary. I mean, I hold Henry ultimately responsible for that, but she definitely supported it. She did try to get Mary on side. She did try to have a relationship with Mary, but she also played a role, and it was something that haunted her in her last days in the Tower, something she wanted to express regret for and apologise for. So she wasn't this perfect person either. I can't stand her when she's put on a pedestal and she's seen as saintly, and or that she's seen as like the leader of the Reformation. She didn't lead the Reformation. She played a big role in it, but she didn't like bring it in to England. She wasn't groomed to be a leader of the Reformation. So yes, so lots and lots of things. But I'm going to have to go now because it is 12 minutes past 1 in the morning here. Although I'm not sure I'm going to get much sleep at the party that's going out in our town square here. But it's been really, really wonderful talking to you and answering questions. And I'm so sorry I've been hopeless at missing questions. I mean, I'm scrolling through, there are so many. So we'll have to have another one, won't we? Because there are going to be quite a few of you that are very upset that I haven't answered your question. I'm very, 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 very sorry. So yes, we'll do another one soon because I quite enjoyed myself. It's been nice talking to you and just having an excuse to talk Tudor for an hour, getting the kids off to bed. Tim's just relaxing on the sofa there, pretending he's not listening. But yeah, it's been really wonderful. And thank you so much for your encouragement and your support. I could not be doing the job that I'm doing on a daily basis if it wasn't for you actually loving what I do. It means so much to me. I really, really mean that. From the bottom of my heart, it means so much to me that people enjoy what I do and give me so much encouragement. And I love the fact that I can have this interactive kind of thing with you, that, you know, I put my thoughts out there, I share with you some research or some historical goodie, and I get feedback straight away with, don't talk nonsense, Claire, or, oh yeah, well, I haven't seen that point before, thank you for mentioning that. I love that interaction that I can get from blogging, from running the Tudor Society, from having these videos, podcasts, and that it's just really wonderful to have a dialogue with readers and viewers and to take on board your ideas as well, because, you know, there are times where well, there are lots of times where you come up with points and I suddenly think, oh, I haven't thought about that before, and that inspires me to go and dig a bit more into things and to research things more. So thank you so much. So I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your weekend as well. But thank you very, very much for joining me, and I wish you all the best, and I will see you very soon. Take care and loads of love. Bye bye.